pretty representative of the kind of experience you'll have in a big team multiplayer battle. If you're sticking to the campaign, you might not feel too bad about losing a few frames, in which case the GTX 1650 can actually still manage a 50 FPS average at medium. In case you were wondering, these scores are only about concluding my Sony titles. God of War is also a game that needs some quality compromises in Forspoken didn't get great reviews on launch and has also been reportedly quite janky on PC, hence why this is the demo and not the full game. It appears that the demo is receiving patches, however, as I was testing version 1.04, which is the latest available at the time of recording. Gameplay seems fine, and I didn't encounter any of the bugs I've seen reported elsewhere. Performance, however, is pretty dire. Like many of the AA and AAA games in this video, the GTX 1650 is far below the recommended specs, and FSR can't really save it. At standard settings, FSR quality delivers about 23 FPS and is particularly rough in combat. FSR performance almost reaches 30, but again, several effects that occur in combat can cause things to slow to a crawl. The only solution that seems to work consistently, even in large-scale combat, is 1080 low with FSR performance, and that does rather leave the game looking like trash. For all the incendiary titles that have launched lately, it's nice to try a game that's controversial for good old-fashioned reasons. Features like Lumen and Nanite mean that this game can take some seriously powerful. All in all then, I'm afraid the GTX 1650 looks like a pretty poor candidate for the most popular graphics card in the world in 2023. Sure, it's more than good enough for older titles. It'll happily chew through CSGO,
Hello guys, Crispy here and welcome back to another video. In this GPU intensive, because you got a lot of vegetation there. Ooh, that was a massive stutter right there. I think it started swapping some things. Now we got 69 FPS in The Last of Us Part 1. Look at that. So we're playing this one at the 1080p resolution using FSR2 set to quality and the automatic settings, which is low graphic settings with medium textures basically. And I'm not sure, I think it's not gonna stay at 60 plus FPS all of the time, unfortunately, but yeah, I would actually play with these settings, okay? FSR here at 1080p doesn't look that bad on a huge 4K monitor like I'm using right now. It does look quite rough, but in a smaller monitor I have tried it already and it looks really decent. Now look in this direction, yeah, things do drop from 60 FPS into the higher 50s. It's a single player title once again, so I'm okay with a few drops here and there, as long as the averages are above 60 FPS. I think it's a completely fine experience. You could say. Well, this is not it. It's running on its last legs in those titles. You saw that we've had to play a lot of games, like The Last of Us Part 1, for example, at 1080p medium or low settings to achieve roughly 60 FPS or like 50 to 60. And it's like borderline minimum, I would say, for a decent experience. But the thing is, this is not a $200 GPU anymore, and if you can grab it for 80 bucks like I did, I think it's a really nice deal, guys. You can play
take one of August 18th Mystery Tech.
Austin, what do you got there? No. What do you got there?
This
Yeah.
is the clapper board.
Look at how ratty and out of date it is, and
Yeah,
it looks.
This looks expensive.
It is.
RoboSyn Transformers, more than meets the eye. What the f is that? What? So this one's $700. What's this one? And what's the giant one?
The small one you have in your hand is the Bumblebee version. That's a robot. It doesn't transform, but it's still like, it does all the robot kind of stuff. That's
Okay.
$400.
And what is this nonsense Roboraptor knockoff?
He is $1,700 and will be released sometime in the fall.
Can I just say thank you to Robo?
And you don't care.
That's why I feel bad. Let's say mentioned Bumblebee is just in his idle animation right now.
He's chilling.
He's just chilling. So we've got the same thing: missions, remote control actions. Dude. Okay, is that my Taco Bell hat? And that's my. Wait. Okay. What is going on? Wait.
Okay.
6 years on, and AMD's Vega line of GPUs still have a way of surprising people. The Vega 56 was a shockingly good overclocker, especially when combined with undervolting, and in 2023 both the 56 and 64 have reached appealingly low prices. But competition is pretty strong from RDNA 1 and Turing. Thanks to a little known and somewhat forgotten feature, however, Vega might still come out on top. Team Green evidently caught AMD off guard with Pascal, as Vega 56 and 64 would only emerge to meet GTX 1070 and 1080 more than a year after the Nvidias were released. The people who did buy Vega found out they were remarkably flexible when it comes to dropping voltages and increasing clocks. However, I'm not going to retread that particular ground today. I already covered much of it with the Vega 56 last year. Like that card, the Vega 64 can run at higher than stock clocks with lower than stock voltages, meaning for a 5 to 15% uplift over stock with virtually the same power consumption. In this video, I'm going to be running this Sapphire Vega 64 at what I consider to be optimal settings. I've adjusted the power curve in Afterburner to roughly output 1700 MHz at 1.1 volts, with the power limit slider pushed to the maximum. The really interesting thing that I learned about from my friends over at Hardware Hardware Lab is a feature called HBCC, or High Bandwidth Cache Controller. This feature is unique to more recent AMD cards with HBM VRAM. I'm not aware of an equivalent for the Nvidia Titan V, and I believe the AMD Fury cards aren't compatible with it. HBCC kinda allows for unlimited VRAM. Your system RAM becomes your video memory, with a slider in the drivers allowing you to determine just how much of it can be allocated to the graphics card. Of course, if you've ever used integrated graphics, you'll know that using standard DRAM for video isn't always the best idea. Instead of VRAM being immediately accessible to the GPU, data has to travel via the memory and PCIe buses, creating latency. However, the idea of HBCC is that the 8GB of ultra-fast HBM2 on the card acts as a cache, reducing any latency issues. The reason you probably don't hear much about HBCC these days is, well, it didn't catch on. HBCC isn't enabled on cards with GDDR6 or other more conventional types of memory like those used in the RX 6000 and 7000 series. And HBM cards are now few and far between. The only cards I'm aware of that can use this function are this Vega 64, the lower end Vega 56, and the Radeon 7, all of which were cards that already had quite a lot of VRAM for their day. Well, 8 gigs isn't all that impressive in 2023. Several of this year's games use 6 to 7 gigs at 1080p, so it could be that HBCC was a technology waiting for its moment in the sun. To see if that's the case, I'm running my usual test suite on my usual test bench, the Ryzen 5 5600X and 32 gigs of DDR4 3600 CL16. The drivers are the official Adrenalin 23.8.1 set, which were the latest available at the time of recording.
got the best gear we got.
Recording. This means I don't have access to Smart Access Memory, aka resizable bar. This is something that I could test with Nime's drivers, but I'll leave that for another video. Starting with the obvious candidate, The Last of Us, and the Vega 64 puts up a pretty reasonable showing for a 6-year-old card. At 1080 high, we have enough performance for a fairly variable 50 to 60 FPS, averaging at 56.6. Enabling HBCC and giving us access to even more VRAM means nothing. The frame rate is somewhat lower, but close enough to be within margin of error. However, at this point, we are technically below the 8GB maximum, so maybe I need to do what all the big name channels do and bang the quality up to ultra. This pushes us way above the 8GB requirement, according to the menu, and so should definitely cause some instability. Sure enough, while averages are a perfectly playable 45 and lows are a respectable 37, that's not the whole story. There are enough frame time spikes as the VRAM overflows to send 0.1% into the single digits. Enabling HBCC scarcely affects the averages and even the 1%, but completely irons out those massive frame time spikes. 0.1% climb from 9.7 to 33.4. And yes, I did restart the game in between tests. Hence why HBCC makes little or no appreciable difference. Ignoring that conventional wisdom and leaving the textures at 8GB, and things are... But 0.1's only climb from 5 to 15, so it's not all worth celebrating. As with the previous titles, Jedi Survivor is one game that can eat 8GB cards for breakfast, simply running at 1080 high. At the stock 8GB setting, the game can produce about 57 FPS on average, with lows dipping below 40. Again, as would be expected when the VRAM buffer is being exceeded. Turning on HBCC hurts the 1% lows quite badly, almost halving from 39 to 22. The picture's almost as bad at 1440p. The average on both runs pushes past 30, but with HBCC turned off, you could probably use a 30 FPS lock and get a smooth experience, whereas with HBCC on, the minimum drops below 24 FPS. Rift Apart is a pain in the ass to run on the Vega 64 above 1080 medium. At high settings it's smooth enough in regular exploration and traversal, but in set pieces it stutters all over the place, with or without HBCC. I stuck to the medium preset, which was surprisingly good looking,